lowering prices to make everyday life more affordable for working Americans. The president will visit Thermo Fisher Scientific in Ohio and give remarks at Verst Logistics in Kentucky. On Thursday, President Trump and the First Lady will host a Women's History Month event in the East Room. And on Friday, the president will sign several executive orders, and we will provide more details on those later this week. As President Trump shared with the American people last night, the United States military is making tremendous strides towards achieving our military objectives for Operation Epic Fury. 10 days in, this campaign has been a resounding success thus far, and America's warriors are winning this important fight at an even faster pace than we anticipated. More than 5,000 enemy targets have been struck so far. Iran's ballistic missile attacks are down more than 90%, and their drone attacks are down by approximately 85% since the start of Operation Epic Fury. The United States is also annihilating the Iranian regime's navy, and we have destroyed more than 50 Iranian naval vessels, including a major drone carrier ship. None of the regime's vessels are operating in major regional waterways, and the Iranian Navy has been assessed as combat ineffective. The trend is clear. U.S. combat capabilities are increasing and growing more lethal and dominant by the day, while the Iranian terrorist regime's ability to respond has rapidly declined. Now, the U.S. military is moving to dismantle Iran's missile production infrastructure. Our incredible B-2 bombers recently dropped dozens of 2,000-pound penetrator bombs on deeply buried missile sites. Last night, President Trump reiterated his commitment toward keeping oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz so the United States and all of our allies can receive their energy needs. President Trump will not allow rogue Iranian terrorists to stop the freedom of navigation and the free flow of energy. Let me be clear. It is a good thing to wipe out terrorists who indiscriminately target civilians and attempt to hold the global economy hostage, and President Trump should be commended for doing so. As the president made unequivocally clear to the remaining elements of this terrorist regime in his statement yesterday, if they do anything to stop the flow of oil or goods within the Strait of Hormuz, they will be hit by the world's most powerful military 20 times harder than they have been hit thus far. Moving forward, the stated objectives for Operation Epic Fury remain the same: destroy the terrorist regime's ballistic missiles, raise their Iranian missile industry to the ground, ensure their terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region, and ensure that Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon. President Trump remains confident these goals will be accomplished in swift fashion. As for the oil, President Trump fully expected the rogue Iranian regime to try and disrupt the global markets. That's why President Trump and his energy team have been planning for this long before the strike and have moved quickly to address these temporary disruptions. Thus far, the Trump administration has offered political risk insurance to tankers operating in the Gulf. The Treasury temporarily waived certain oil-related sanctions, and the Commander-in-Chief has offered the U.S. Navy to escort tankers when necessary. The president and his energy team are closely watching the markets, speaking with industry leaders, and the U.S. military is drawing up additional options following the president's directive to continue keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. I will not broadcast what those options look like, but just know the president is not afraid to use them. Rest assured to the American people, the recent increase in oil and gas prices is temporary, and this operation will result in lower gas prices in the long term. Once the national security objectives of Operation Epic Fury are fully achieved, Americans will see oil and gas prices drop rapidly, potentially even lower than they were prior to the start of the operation. And we will live in a world where Iran can no longer threaten the United States or our allies with a nuclear bomb. On another matter here at home, President Trump is urging Congress to pass the Save America Act, one of the most critical pieces of legislation in our nation's history. The Save America Act is overwhelmingly popular with all Americans because each provision is rooted in common sense. The Save America Act has 5 simple requirements as requested by the President of the United States. Number 1, voters have to show ID to cast a ballot in an American election. Very simple. 90% of Americans, including more than 80% of Democrat voters, agree with this. Number 2, the Save America Act will require all voters to show proof of citizenship in order to register to vote in American elections. Again, this is popular and rooted in common sense. Only American citizens have the right to vote in American elections. But after Joe Biden and the Democrats allowed tens of millions of illegal aliens into our country, it's more important than ever to ensure that only American citizens are registering to vote on our nation's voter rolls, and Congress needs to pass this. Number 3, the Save America Act abolishes the incredibly unsecure practice of universal mail-in ballots, which throw the door wide open for fraud. Importantly, the Save America Act maintains exceptions for Americans to use mail-in ballots for illness, disability, military, or travel reasons. The bipartisan 2005 report of the Commission on Federal Election Reform, shared by, of all people, former President Jimmy Carter and former Secretary of State James Baker, concluded that, quote, absentee ballots remain the largest source of potential voter fraud, and it is time for Congress to finally address this. Number 4, the Save America Act permanently bans men from competing in women's sports. President Trump signed a landmark executive order upholding the promise of Title IX and ending this dangerous and unfair practice. But now it's time for Congress to codify this into law. Number 5, the Save America Act bans transgender mutilation surgery for children. Again, President Trump signed a common sense executive order to do this and kept his promise to the American people, but now Congress needs to do the same and codify it. It's well past time for Democrats in Congress to stop perpetuating the radical and false claim that you can somehow change a child's sex. You cannot. Passing the Save America Act is the most important thing that Republicans and frankly Democrats can do to strengthen election integrity and protect our democracy. It's what the American people elected Republicans to do, and they must deliver on it as soon as possible. The president is calling on Congress to get the job done and send this historic piece of legislation to his desk immediately for signature. So with that today, I will take your questions. Benny, thank you for being here, and why don't you start us off?
Thank you, Caroline. So my first question is actually about the Save America Act. So one of the biggest things that the Democrats are saying, the claims that they're making, is that the Save America Act, it would prevent married women from voting in elections or make it harder for them. What do you have to say to those claims? Is there any validity to them, and where do you think they're getting this from?
There is zero validity to these claims, and I'm glad that you brought them up, because you have the Democrats who have created this myth, and it has been perpetuated, unfortunately, by many in the mainstream media. Let me be very clear. The Save America Act does not prohibit anyone from voting, with the exception